Audi's Q7 7-seat luxury SUV has always made a big impact, but the improved version of this second-generation model aims to be a little smarter than its predecessors, in more ways than one. The Ingolstadt brand has not only sharpened the styling, but also introduced efficient mild hybrid and plug-in hybrid technology, standardised air suspension, and installed one of the classiest cabins in the segment. As a result, if you really want a car of this kind, you may well find yourself really wanting this one.
Just as the dinosaurs evolved to suit a changing planet, so have large luxury SUVs. Audi's enormous Q7 more than most. Here's a vastly improved version of the second generation Type 4 M series model, which gets smarter looks and the enhancement of mild hybrid power across the range. Ever since the very first Mark 1 Type 4 L Series Q7 was launched back in 2005, it's been a vehicle that Middle England families have always rather liked, but, if truth were told, felt a bit awkward about owning. The first generation Q7's sheer size, power and weight were hardly in keeping with these eco-conscious times, hence the need for the Mark 2 model that was launched in 2015, the original version of the car that we're going to take a look at here. It was far lighter and far more efficient than its predecessor, and it was slightly smaller too, although somehow it was even bigger inside, all of which was possible courtesy of an all-new MLB Evo platform, which was also designed for much pricier Porsche and Bentley Volkswagen Group SUVs. The result of all this was a model dynamically very different from the large, lumbering original version, and it enabled the Ingolstadt brand to rejuvenate its proposition amongst large luxury SUVs, which is just as well, given that these days this segment is a tougher place to survive in than ever before. Since this Type 4 M Series Mark II Q7 was first launched, we've seen all new versions of rivals like BMW's X5, the Mercedes GLE and the Land Rover Discovery, with nearly every competing brand in the sector copying this Audi's provision of 7 seats to suit larger families. Upper spec Q7s now also have BMW's all-new X7 and a fresh generation version of the Mercedes GLS to deal with too. Arguably, this car's closest rival, the Volvo XC90, has always offered 3 seating rows. That Swedish contender was updated in 2019 with mild hybrid technology, which, as mentioned earlier, is also the headline improvement for this revised version of the second generation Q7, also launched in mid-2019. Audi has taken the opportunity here for a quick stylistic nip and tuck, and there's a classier cabin, along with extra safety and autonomous driving tech. Plus, there are fresh plug-in hybrid variants on offer, and air suspension is now standard across the range. But will it all be enough to allow the Q7 to keep pace in this rapidly evolving segment? Let's find out. Back in 2005, when the original version of this Q7 was first launched, it seemed absolutely enormous, and many of us wondered just how relevant such a huge SUV would be on tight, twisty British roads. These days, that kind of questioning no longer seems so relevant, not only because we're much more used to vehicles of this type, but also because more recent designs look and feel so much more agile and manoeuvrable. This second generation Q7 model was one of those. It was aided by its use of a stiffer and less bulky MLB Evo chassis, which was also destined for the Volkswagen Group's more sporting Porsche Cayenne and Lamborghini Urus SUVs. Thus equipped, this Audi became a little lighter on its feet. The next step was for it to become a little lighter on the environment, hence the wider use of electrification on this much improved version of the Type 4 M Series Q7 model. Audi dabbled with hybrid technology with this second generation Q7 in its original form. There was a plug-in V6 diesel e-tron version and an SQ7 V8 diesel performance model with a 48-volt mild hybrid setup, but these were pricey variants that few Q7 customers bothered with. It's different now. That 48-volt mild hybrid tech features right across the range, and if that's not enough and your pockets are deeper, 2 more powerful PHEV plug-in TFSI TFSI-E derivatives now top off the lineup. Their electrification is now paired to petrol power. In short, there's plenty to assure a Q7 owner that this car is now a more environmentally responsible choice these days, even if its actual efficiency figures aren't ultimately all that different. We'll start with the mild hybrid tech that you'll now find fitted to the mainstream derivatives, which virtually all Q7 customers choose, principally the 45 TDI and 50 TDI variants, which respectively use 231 PS and 286 PS versions of the brand's creamy smooth V6 TDI diesel, matched to the company's usual 8-speed Tiptronic torque converter auto gearbox. This pair of models joins the alternative 3-litre V6 petrol derivative, the 340 PS 55 TFSI, in belatedly adopting the 48-volt system, which has always been fitted to this car's sleeker and more sporting Q8 showroom stablemate. The technology here is pretty much the same as that which features with rival Mercedes and Volvo mild hybrid setups. So there's an integrated BAS belt alternator starter generator powering a 48-volt main electrical setup in which a compact lithium-ion battery in the boot stores energy harvested via a KERS, or kinetic energy recovery system. That additional electricity might be used either to boost the engine when you're accelerating or to restart it when the stop-start system kicks in at low speeds. Or that surplus energy might instead be directed to help power ancillary functions. Audi's overall objective here wasn't to provide Prius-like periods of electric-only driving, but instead to make its engines more efficient via smoother transitions between driving, cruising and resting. The technology is so seamlessly built into these powertrains that you simply don't notice it. There are certainly no fancy graphics, nor do you have to press any buttons or plug it in. We can see why 90% of Q7 buyers go for the V6 diesel. It's so appealing in its balance between performance, refinement and efficiency. Pulling power is in prodigious supply, even in the base 45 TDI version, which has 500 Newton meters of it, thrusting nearly 2.2 tons of Ingolstadt real estate to 62 from rest in 7.3 seconds on the way to 142 miles an hour. Those are figures that this alternative 50 TDI derivative improves to 6.5 seconds. That's over a second quicker than an equivalent Volvo XC90 B5 diesel with a top speed of 150 miles an hour. All of that performance accompanied by 600 Newton meters of torque. If frugality wasn't an issue, then you might conceivably prefer the alternative 55 TFSI petrol model, which improves those figures to 5.9 seconds and 155 miles an hour, but in the real world, it is. So in going for a diesel instead, you can console yourself with the fact that the TDI has a more emotive growl and it's more refined under urgent acceleration. A more responsible way of choosing that 3-litre petrol V6 is to get it mated up with Audi's latest TFSI-E plug-in technology, which sees that engine paired up to an electric motor, which in turn is powered by a much bigger version of the lithium-ion battery that features with Audi's mild hybrid tech. This one's 17.3 kilowatt hours in size. Two plug-in variants are offered. Your starting point is the 55 TFSI-E model with a combined system output of 380 PS. Ideally, though, you'd want the top 60 TFSI-E competition derivative, which uses the same advanced powertrain that you'd find in a Bentley Bentayga PHEV and in the top plug-in Porsche Cayenne. This features a gutsier 94 kilowatt version of the electric motor, which helps push total output to 455 PS, and the rest is 62 time below 6 seconds. The WLTP rated all-electric driving range of a Q7 TFSI-E is around 26 miles. Unfortunately, though, as we'll highlight in our design section, Audi, unlike Volvo, still hasn't found a way of packaging up its plug-in tech so as to allow for a third seating row. Given that those extra chairs tend to be important to Q7 folk, a buyer of this Audi who wanted extra performance might conceivably be more interested in the lineup's alternative flagship model, and that's a V8 diesel-powered SQ7 TDI, which retains the additional rear-mounted pews. None of that car's 4-litre V8 black pump fuel power plant no longer features in either the Porsche Cayenne or the Bentley Bentayga, Audi's SQ7 and SQ8 models can use it exclusively, and they can claim without contradiction to be the most potent diesel sports SUVs on the market. Thanks to an electrical compressor assisting the engine's twin turbos, you get 435 PS of power and 900 Nm of torque. Those are outputs able to embarrass direct rivals. A Range Rover Sport SDV8 manages 339 PS and 740 Nm, while with a BMW M50D it's 400 PS and 760 Nm. That, unsurprisingly, means that the SQ7 can offer a class-leading set of performance stats, rest to 62 in 4.8 seconds, and a top speed that would probably be over 170 miles an hour were it not for the speed limiter that cuts in at 155. But would you really want to go that fast in a Q7? In a more mainstream model like the 50 TDI variant we're testing here, you're certainly not encouraged to press on much. And now partly that's down to the automatic gearbox, which sometimes seems a touch reluctant to engage with you, either when fast kickdowns are needed for overtaking or when a quick pull away from standstill is required. And this Audi feels equally reluctant to be hurried when the road turns twisty. Thanks to its stiffer platform and its better optimised weight, this Mark II model doesn't lurch about through the bends like the pre-2015 era version did, but throwing it into a corner still delivers plenty of the kind of body roll that you would inevitably expect a large SUV to exhibit. The rather lifeless steering doesn't help much. It masks traction that's actually quite impressive thanks to permanent quattro four-wheel drive and the torque vectoring system that's built into it. Now this uses light and imperceptible braking intervention to transfer traction to the driving wheels on the inside of a curve, firing you through the bend. The top Vorsprung model adds in an all-wheel steering system that adds to the feeling of agility. As usual with such technology, the idea is to improve high-speed cornering stability by making the rear wheels slightly turn in the same direction as those at the front, and to improve low-speed manoeuvrability by getting them to turn in the opposite direction to those at the front. It's the parking speed enhancement that you'll probably notice most. It reduces the turning circle significantly, and that makes slotting this 5-metre long SUV into tight spaces just that bit easier. Also limited to the top of the range, specifically the Black Edition and Vorsprung variants, is a slightly lowered adaptive sport suspension package. Now this is a firmed up version of the air suspension setup, which now features in its ordinary form as standard on the Sport and the S-Line Q7 variants that most buyers of this car choose. Now we prefer this air sprung package in its conventional guise, and we really like the way that it really does smooth away most bumps and ruts. As usual with air suspended setups, this one continuously adjusts the damping at all four wheels, and it provides a self-leveling feature which automatically regulates ride height. Really bad potholes and tarmac tears can still make themselves felt in the cabin. That's courtesy of Audi's decision to use a twin-chamber system rather than the rather more sophisticated 3-chamber setup which Porsche fits to its rival Cayenne. But overall, there's little to fault. This Q7 flows comfortably over things like speed humps, while at the same time being able to keep chassis movement in check through turns at higher speeds without channel ferry levels of body roll. The air springs can raise the body up to 90 millimeters higher than the standard ride height for ramps or more capable rough road progress, and at over 74 miles an hour they can automatically lower the car by 15 millimeters to reduce drag and increase stability. In short, suspension here is a real selling point. As you'd expect, ride quality is one of the parameters that you can influence via the usual Audi Drive Select driving mode system, and that package works primarily through the usual comfort, efficiency and dynamic settings, and as usual it influences a whole range of driving elements, things like throttle response, gear shift timings, stability system thresholds, steering feel, and as just mentioned, the settings of the air suspension too. If you can't decide between the various modes, then there's an auto setting, while if you want to specifically alter the parameters and get, say, sharp steering feel without sharp throttle response, then there's an extra individual mode option with a menu that you can tweak to your own preferences. In a Q7, Drive Select has off-piste options too. The all-road mode is the kind of thing that you might activate for an unmade track. It raises the suspension by 25mm to cover difficult terrain. For anything gnarlier than that, though, you'll need the final off-road mode, which optimises the four-wheel drive torque split and activates the HDC, the hill descent control system, when it's needed. HDC provides automatic braking input to ease you down steep slopes with an incline of more than 6%, during which the car will maintain a constant speed limited at just under 19 miles an hour. Provided you keep your speed below 18 miles an hour, the off-road setting can also raise the air suspension even higher, allowing the body of this car to ride up to as much as 245mm from the deck. Although, don't let that tempt you into getting too ambitious away from the beaten track. The car-like monocoque construction that this Audi shares with all its direct rivals ultimately limits it in that regard. And that's something that's evidenced by a modest set of off-road stats that see a Q7 managing an approach angle of 25 degrees, a departure angle of 27 degrees, and a ramp breakover angle of 17 degrees. If, rather unwisely, you'd like to put those readings to the test, then you'll be able to select a centre dash screen that shows pitch and roll angles, your steering wheel angle, your tilt angle, and even geographical altitude, compass and GPS coordinates. By and large, though, this sort of information will be completely irrelevant to almost all Q7 owners who will care only about this car's suitability on the highway, not its prowess in the highlands, which is why this Audi's Quattro all-wheel drive system, a proper permanent setup with a self-locking differential, is primarily designed to maximise traction on a paved surface. It normally distributes power between front and rear axles in a 40-60 ratio, but if a loss of traction is detected, it can instantly transfer as much as 70% of power to the front or up to 85% of power to the rear to help you to retain grip. Mindful of customer priorities, Audi has also ensured that Q7 buyers now have access to all the latest elements of its so-called Level 3 driving autonomy, which works via an optional traffic jam pilot setup. Now, this will allow the car to drive itself in an unsupervised fashion at speeds of up to 37 miles an hour, as long as you're on a major road with a physical barrier separating both directions of traffic. Now, this kind of cleverness is fine when you want it. It's not so good when you don't. Take the way that the latest version of Audi's predictive efficiency system works, for example. This uses GPS data, topographical information, and live traffic updates to proactively promote efficient driving in a way that sees it tapping your foot through the throttle pedal as you approach T-junctions, rather firmly encouraging you to lift off and kickstart energy recuperation. Now, you might, like us, find that kind of thing a bit over the top, but the rejuvenated version of this big Audi isn't. Large luxury SUVs used to be rather excessive things. These days you'll justify one rather more easily, especially if it's a Q7. This second generation Q7 has always been less showy about its size than its predecessor, with sharp shoulder lines and sculpted lower side blades attempting to subtly disguise its still prodigious bulk. With this improved model, there's still more to distract your attention thanks to a package of stylistic Q model hallmark features mainly borrowed from this car's sportier showroom stablemate, the Q8. Primarily, that means the adoption of this large octagon-shaped single-frame grille with its 6 upright slats. More expressive two-part side air vents also feature, and the LED headlights are upgraded to HD matrix status. That setup now standard with its bright white crystal shine. Here, each headlamp unit divides its high beam into 15 individual light-emitting diodes, which are activated or dimmed in 64 stages based on traffic and road condition information gathered by an integrated camera. On most models, the piercing Audi laser light beams that we have here are optional. There are changes at the rear too, where a chrome strip carries forward the horizontal bodyline and creates a visual connection between the glistening LED rear lights with their technical looking graphics. The number plate is now no longer recessed, it's placed instead on a taut flat surface, and these slim lower reflectors have been moved a little further down close to the restyled bumper. As before, the square boxy corners you get in a rival Volvo XC90 or Land Rover Discovery are replaced on this Audi by a falling roofline flowing into a tailgate that wraps around these steeply raised D-pillars. The idea is to emphasise this Q7's slightly sportier intent, and that's an attitude that's further embellished by the roof spoiler and by the lower diffuser of this S-line trimmed model. And in profile, well, get the tape measure out and you'll find that this facelifted Type 4M series has grown in length by 11mm, but otherwise little appears to have changed apart from a restyled palette of alloy wheel designs. As before, rim sizes start at 19 inches, but you'll need something a little larger than that to fill these enormous flared arches. So it's now possible to get wheels of up to 22 inches in size, like these 5 V-spoke star rims we have here. The mirrors remain mounted high on a distinct shoulder line, dominated by 2 sharp creases. Plus, as previously, the doors get those smart Quattro branded trim blades we mentioned earlier that are pulled down to cover the sills, preventing you from cleaning those with your trousers when you get out. As usual though, what's more important is the stuff you can't see, a body based around multi-material Audi space frame, steel and aluminium construction, and bolted to the full-length version of the stiff, strong MLB Evo chassis that all Volkswagen Group brands now use for their large SUVs. Time to take a look inside. The exterior changes made to this facelifted second generation Q7 may be subtle, but we're promised that the cabin updates certainly won't be. And sure enough, it's all very different in here to anything a Q7 driver will have experienced before. Audi delivers what it calls its luxury lounge architecture, based around the upmarket cabin structure it now uses on all its larger models. You're going to need to like screens because this gloss black panelled layout incorporates no fewer than 3 of them. The 2 that you'll notice first, they power up as soon as the doors opened, and they dominate the upper and lower parts of the shiny centre stack here. In an attempt to deliver the required splash of luxury needed for a car of this status, the designers have fashioned this backlit aluminium strip which flows the width of the dash and curves under the upper MMI screen. There is rather a lot of that high gloss black surfacing here, but it's all exquisitely lit at night, and if you can stretch further to the optional full leather pack we have here, which coats the dash in lovely stitched leather, you'll get a cabin that feels very high-end indeed. Now, we said there were 3 screens. The third one is found in the instrument binnacle, the now familiar 12.3-inch configurable virtual cockpit display, which the brand fits right across its model range. Here, as usual, it works with 2 selectable layouts, a classical view, which prioritises a couple of prominent dials separated by an information screen, and an infotainment mode, which shrinks the pair of gauges to allow more central space for various data readouts or a full-width navigation map. With the optional Virtual Cockpit Plus package that we have fitted here, you get an additional dynamic display. Now, you view all this information through a grippy 3-spoke stitched steering wheel, and you're seated here on supportive leather-stitched chairs which feature heating, electrical adjustment and 4-way lumbar support. We've no issues with any of this, but we're not quite so sure about the fundamental concept behind the 2 MMI touch response centre stack monitors I mentioned earlier, mainly because it relies almost entirely on screen touch and voice control. The rotary controller by the gear stick, which used to feature in this car, made it much easier to access particular infotainment screen functions without taking your eyes away from the road. To be fair though, this revised Q7's twin screen setup does work a little better than the similar one which is found on larger Range Rovers. Firstly because here the lower display deals primarily with climate control and comfort functions, and secondly, because the whole system functions more effectively with haptic feedback, which sees the touchscreen surface emit a tactile and acoustic signal when a function's pressed. You have to press pretty firmly though, a bit like if you were to be using a touchpad on a laptop computer, which, as already mentioned, isn't ideal if you want quick access to something without looking at it. The 10.1-inch upper display features tile apps that you can move around with the kind of drag and drop functionality that you'll be used to from your smartphone. They deal with the most important radio, media, telephone and navigational functions. Plus, as you'd expect, there's the usual Audi smartphone interface, which is compatible with the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems. You have to pay extra for that on most rival models in this segment. There's a 10GB flash memory for music storage, and of course you get a full suite of Audi Connect media connectivity features that, amongst other things, deliver online media streaming, a Google Points of Interest search function, a comprehensive Audi online traffic information system, plus there's news and weather feeds via a Wi-Fi hotspot which supports the superfast LTE advanced mobile data network. The system's natural voice control functionality, well, that's nothing like as sophisticated as the more intuitive voice setup that you get in a rival Mercedes GLE, but it does incorporate the cloud-based Amazon voice service Alexa. Configurable screen favorites buttons help to tailor the system to user preferences, and they allow up to 7 drivers to store their preferred settings in individual user profiles and set up to 400 parameters. As we've said, the lower monitor, which is 8.6 inches in size, is reserved for more comfort-orientated features. Plus, its screen can allow you to trace letters with your fingertip so that the search system can then give you selection options. Of course, you might expect that to be just another thing that would leave these shiny displays continually coated in grubby fingerprints, and you might also worry about sunlight reflection. And now Audi has tried with partial success to mitigate both of those issues by using an anti-fingerprint coating and a layer of anti-glare film, but to some extent both problems still remain. What we do like about this setup though is the way that the upper screen can be turned off to prevent nighttime distraction, and its main functions summarised on the top part of the lower display. Ultimately, there is a lot to get to grips with here. This isn't one of those cars that it's easy to get into and drive without familiarity. It'll take a while to learn where everything is, and until you get used to your Q7, for safety's sake, you'll need to get everything set up to your liking before you set off. What else? Well, a head-up display is fitted only to the top Vorsprung variants, but this isn't as informative as rival setups, and with the virtual cockpit instrument binnacle screen fitted, we don't really think there's actually much need for it. The pedals, seat and steering wheel are all naturally aligned for a perfect driving posture, and there's a well-positioned footrest to the left of the brake. All-round vision from the driver's seat here is excellent, and the large heated door mirrors offer a really clear view of what's approaching from the rear. The left-hand one, that tilts down automatically when you select reverse to give you a better view of the curb when you're parking. That will be aided by the standard fitment of all-round sensors and a reversing camera, both of which you'll need because the thick rear pillars and the rear headrests block large portions of your over-the-shoulder view. Onto storage space. Now, one of the problems with having a 2-screen center console layout like this one is that it leaves no space for the storage cubby that in most cars would sit just ahead of the gear stick and act as a handy place to stash your phone. Also lacking in this Q7 is a decently big storage bin between the seats. You do get one, but it's shallow and it's almost completely taken up by the standard wireless charging mat. This lidded box has a top that can slide forward and function as an armrest, and if you lift it up you'll find that the area it conceals incorporates SIM and SD card points as well as a couple of USB points. What else? Well, the lidded cup holder compartment to the left of the gear lever incorporates a 12-volt socket. The door bins aren't especially big, and there's no overhead compartment for your sunglasses. Plus, Audi hasn't thought about fitting under-seat drawers or a net in the front passenger footwell. But you do get a decently sized air-conditioned glove box over there, which includes a pen clip and which is refreshingly unencumbered by media equipment. In addition, there is a ticket clip on the driver's sun visor here, along with a large concealed cubby down here by the driver's right knee. Let's take a look at the second row, access to which is helped by this large door aperture. Passengers back here benefit from Audi's standard rear bench seat plus package, which gives you 3 individual seats, each featuring 110 millimetres of longitudinal travel, so they can be pushed forwards or backwards to maximise either legroom or the space behind. Plus, the outer backrests recline through 16 increments for greater comfort on longer journeys. Overall, the leg and knee room on offer is about the same as you get in a Volvo XC90, and it's a few centimetres better than what's provided by either a BMW X5 or a Land Rover Discovery. A headspace that isn't quite as good as either the Disco or the Volvo, but impressively, there's enough shoulder room for 3 adults to comfortably sit side by side, and that isn't always the case with this class of car. Buyers have the pricey option of this huge panoramic glass roof, which gives this part of the cabin a light, airy feel, and that's something we think you'd really want in a 7-seat SUV. Stretch to one of the plusher models and you'll get a 4-zone climate control system, which gives you this separate activation screen above the relatively low-set transmission tunnel. A couple of USB ports and a 12-volt socket are found here too, along with twin vents, which supplement those that feature on both B-pillars. This central armrest here neatly incorporates a couple of pop-out cup holders, and the door pulls incorporate ashtrays, although that doesn't seem very politically correct in this day and age. In addition, you get netted seat back pockets, door bins that can accommodate 1.5 litre bottles, 3 Isofix child seat mounting points, and smart touch-sensitive overhead reading lights. Okay, what about third row functionality? Well, you don't necessarily get that on a Q7. A 5-seat only configuration is conditional if you go for the plug-in TFSI E versions of this model. Audi still having failed to find a way of packaging the PHEV system's battery in a way that allows for the installation of boot-mounted chairs. For most owners of this Q7 though, the usual standard 7-seat layout will be part of the appeal of this car. So, time to put that to the test. Now, Audi doesn't pretend this area to be suitable for adults and long distances. With this sloping rear roofline, it could never be. Still, the company's designers have put a great deal of effort into making these rearmost pews decently accessible. Now, you would expect to get to them by pulling the outer middle seat forward. Instead, you fold the backrest down onto its base, and then you pull the folded base up towards the front seat, which frees up a much wider aperture through which you can reach the third row. There's no magic being worked on the available standards of legroom you get once you're back here though, and for any kind of comfort here as an adult, you're going to have to ask those in the middle row here to push their seats forward a bit. Should you manage to negotiate that, then a pew here as an adult really wouldn't be too objectionable on a short journey, and you would certainly be better off here than you would be in a BMW X5 or a Range Rover Sport fitted with third row chairs. But the Q7's swept-back roofline means that it's nothing like as spacious here as it would be in a rival Volvo XC90 or Land Rover Discovery. Still, it's really intended for kids of any age. Now, this is one of the very few 7-seat cars we've tested with Isofix child seat fastenings fitted to its third-row chairs, so Audi gets a big tick for that. Overhead reading lights are provided too, as is a cup holder with a trinket tray on either side. Finally, let's take a look at luggage space. Now, as you'll discover when the powered tailgate rises, as usual with large SUVs in this segment, there isn't much of that on offer when all 3 seating rows are in place, just 295 litres of capacity. That's about the same as a Fiesta, and it compares poorly with the 451 litre capacity that you get from a rival Volvo XC90 in the same configuration. There's no more room beneath the boot floor either, particularly quickly on a model like this one with all the paraphernalia of the optional Bose 3D sound system fitted. There's certainly nowhere to store the tonneau cover that you'll have had to take out in order to raise these third row chairs. A couple of silver tie-down points feature, and on the left you'll find a bag hook, a recessed netted pocket, and the switches that'll lower the air suspension by 55mm to make loading easier, plus buttons for the retractable tow bar if you've had that fitted. The tailgate features neat lights that shine down into the cargo bay and an integrated compartment for the warning triangle. Most of the time, of course, you'll probably be running this car with these third row chairs folded down. Buttons are provided for the retraction process, both in the cargo area and on each side of the car behind the second row. Once everything's flat, there's a lot of room to play with. 770 litres to be exact in the standard models, or 650 litres in the 5-seat only plug-in hybrid TFSI E variants. A couple more lashing eyes reveal themselves too. You can improve on the figures that we just quoted by sliding the second row seats forward if you have uncomplaining middle row passengers on board, and possibly by making the backrests more vertical if you're trying to cram in suitcases in a way that still allows the powered tailgate to shut. Otherwise, getting more room means folding the middle row. The backrest falls in a 35-30-35 split, so if you have a long item to push through, say a set of skis, you may merely need to flatten the centre section. Lower everything and as much as 1,955 litres of fresh air can be created in a standard variant, or 1,835 litres in a TFSI E plug-in model. True, that is nothing like as much as you'll get in a boxy Land Rover Discovery, but it's about 85 litres more than you'll get in a rival Volvo XC90 or BMW X5. Audi reckons that around 90% of buyers of this improved second generation Q7 will be buying a 3-litre diesel 45 TDI or 50 TDI variant with either of the two main trim levels, Sport or S-Line, a car like this one. Now, from the launch of this revised Type 4 M Series design, that meant asking prices in the £56,000 to £63,000 range, and that's plumb in the sweet spot of what you'd expect to have to pay for a luxury SUV of this kind. If you want a Q7, it's best to think of the need to pay at the upper end of that bracket, because it's probable that you'll want to add on a couple of £3,000 premiums. One for the S-Line trim package that lifts the look and feel of this Audi quite a lot, and the other to trade up from the 231 PS diesel of the base 45 TDI variant to the torquier 286 PS unit fitted to the 50 TDI derivative that we're trying here. If you really can't face the thought of fueling from the black pump, then your Audi Centre will direct you instead towards a couple of 3-litre V6 petrol variants. There's a conventional 55 TFSI version with 340 PS, which is priced at about the same level as this 50 TDI. Or if you're prepared to spend a bit more, you can have the same V6 petrol engine mated to plug-in technology. That's the alternative 55 TFSI E plug-in model, which boosts its output to 380 PS. All four of the engines just mentioned come not only with Sport and S-Line trim, but also with a meaner looking Black Edition spec, which adds around £5,000 onto the cost of an S-Line derivative. Audi also wants this car to be able to appeal to buyers looking at the most exclusive large SUVs, hence the brand's provision of a top Vorsprung trim level option, which includes virtually the entire contents of the options list, including many items that are not available further down the range, and is therefore pitched right up in the £80,000 to £85,000 bracket. If you want the top 455 PS version of the brand's petrol plug-in engine, that fitted to the 60 TFSI E competition derivative, then you'll have to have that with Vorsprung trim. That only leaves what is arguably the most sporting derivative, the SQ7 TDI with its 4-litre 435 PS V8 diesel. From launch, a straightforward version of one of those cost around £76,000, but it is also possible to have your SQ7 in Vorsprung spec if you're prepared to front up just over £95,000. A few things to bear in mind before we leave talk of the range structure. Firstly, that if you opt for either of the plug-in TFSI E variants, you'll be restricted to a 5-seat only cabin format. 7 seats are otherwise standard, as of course is Quattro 4-wheel drive and this model's usual 8-speed Tiptronic auto gearbox. Good enough. Before we start to look at how those asking figures compare to those being charged by direct rivals, let's position this car for you within Audi's own lineup, with the caveat that none of the alternative Ingolstadt models that we're just about to mention can offer the option of 7 seats. So if you want that with an Audi badge, it's this Q7 or nothing. You're probably aware that the brand offers this large SUV's engineering with a sportier 5-seat body style in the shape of its more style-orientated Q8 model. Prices for that car start at a higher point, around $67,000 at the time of this test, partly because a Q8 can't be had with this Q7's base sport trim. Compare like with like further up the range and you'll find that a Q8 commands a premium of around £5,000 over a Q7. Another quite different option for similar money is found in the form of Audi's all-electric e-tron large SUV, which in 55 Quattro form costs from around £72,000. Subtract the government grant that you'll get towards purchase of an e-tron and you'll find yourself looking at paying a fraction more than would be necessary to get a Q7 50 TDI in plush black edition guise. Another different way to go would be to opt for Audi's A6 Avant Estate, most relevantly here the A6 all-road version, which offers a limited amount of off-piste prowess. It uses the same 45 TDI and 50 TDI diesel engines as this Q7, and with asking figures beginning at around £55,000, it costs around the same amount. And finally, you might also want to know the price gap back to the next model down in Audi's Q Series SUV lineup, the Q5. That sells primarily in the £40,000 to £50,000 bracket, but it uses a range of less powerful engines. Right, enough with Ingolstadt model comparisons. Let's move on to the mainstream rivals that potential Q7 buyers will be looking at in the premium large SUV segment, with our competitor price focus being against the 3-litre TDI mild hybrid diesel versions of this Audi that, as we've said, most customers will be considering. The Q7's 7-seat format means that this car tends not to compete against models in this sector that can't be ordered with 3 seating rows, so cars like Volkswagen's Touareg, Porsche's Cayenne and the Range Rover Velar. Instead, potential buyers will most commonly be looking at either a Land Rover Discovery, a Mercedes GLE or a Volvo XC90, all versions of which come with 7 seats as standard, or virtually all in the case of the Mercedes. Perhaps the Q7 buyer might also possibly be considering either a BMW X5 or a Range Rover Sport, where a couple of occasional extra chairs in the boot can be added in as an optional extra. Of all the SUVs just mentioned, the Volvo XC90 is the only one that in its volume diesel forms can directly rival the Q7 by offering efficient, mild hybrid self-charging tech. Mercedes does have the technology too, but at the time of this test restricted its availability to pricey, high-performance petrol variants of its GLE model. Both the XC90 and the GLE cost much the same as this Audi, but the boxier Volvo offers slightly more space for luggage and third-row seating. And unlike a Q7, the XC90 can be had in plug-in form with the 2 extra seats in the boot. The Land Rover Discovery also has more interior space than a Q7, and base versions of that will save you around £8,000 over an equivalent Q7, but that Solihull SUV's conventional engines are less frugal than those of this Audi, with smoky emissions that'll mean a much higher tax bill. Plus, if you equalise the spec of a base Discovery to that of a base Q7, you'll find that that £8,000 price gap will diminish substantially. We can't imagine that many potential buyers of this Audi will choose a 7-seat BMW X5 or Range Rover Sport over a Q7 either. Both are significantly less efficient and more expensive, the Range Rover Sport particularly so, and they're very cramped in the third row. If you're looking at spending £75,000 to £85,000 on one of the top Vorsprung spec versions of this Q7, it's quite possible that you'll have two particular separate large SUV rivals most keenly in mind, BMW's X7 and the Mercedes GLS. Now, these will both give you more space than is on offer from this Audi, particularly in the third row. But in model-for-model comparisons with the Q7 Vorsprung, there'd be less standard equipment with the X7 and the GLS, so it depends what you want. And finally, a word about your options if your focus is on full hybrid plug-in power. The Q7 55 TFSI-E model is priced directly against two particularly obvious rivals, the Volvo XC90 T8 and the BMW X5 xDrive 45e. As mentioned earlier, the XC90 T8 has an advantage in that it can offer 7 seats. For similar money, there is also the Mercedes GLE 350DE, but that car mates its hybrid system to a diesel engine. The Range Rover Sport P400E and the Porsche Cayenne E hybrid plug-in SUVs both cost significantly more than a Q7 55 TFSI-E. Those two cars are more directly targeted by the faster Q7 60 TFSI-E competition model. And finally, let's tell you that Lexus offers a full hybrid in this class that can be had with 3 seating rows, the RXL, but that is a full hybrid of the self-charging variety, which means that it can't be plugged in and therefore it can't run for significant periods in full electric mode. That Lexus model would save you around, well, £10,000 up front over a Q7 55 TFSI-E, but this Audi would claw back much of that difference over time thanks to its better fuel consumption and its lower taxation exposure. Enough with the comparisons. If, having considered all that, you might well come to the conclusion that a Q7 is exactly what you want. And if so, then you'll want to know exactly how generous Audi has been with the standard spec. So let's look in detail at that now. Now, there's plenty, even if you opt for the most affordable sport trim level. Such a base spec Q7 would feature 19-inch alloy wheels, and all versions of this Audi now have adaptive air suspension, which can vary ride height by up to 90 millimetres. Plus, also now standard are matrix LED headlights, which adapt to traffic and road conditions and which feature unique animations as you lock or unlock the car. Other standard sports spec inclusions which feature right across the range, well, they run to aluminium roof rails, front and rear parking sensors, a reversing camera, heat insulating glass, auto headlamps and wipers. There's also a power operated tailgate, LED tail lamps and an anti-theft alarm, as well as a very comprehensive level of camera driven safety equipment, which we'll get to later. Inside, with a sports spec model, there's twin leather upholstery, plus all Q7s now feature the 12.3-inch Audi virtual cockpit instrument binnacle screen, which used to be optional. Other standard items which feature on a sport model and across the Q7 range run to power-adjustable heated front seats with 4-way lumbar support and powered operation for raising or lowering the third-row chairs. Also included are dual-zone climate control, a leather multifunction steering wheel with gear shift paddles, an interior LED lighting package. You have keyless starting, cruise control and an auto-dimming rear-view mirror. And there's also the Audi Drive Select adaptive dynamics system. Now that means that you can tweak steering, throttle response, ride quality and also the change times of the 8-speed automatic gearbox. And that's all to suit the way that you want to drive. Perhaps the most important piece of standard interior equipment, though, is this car's high-end infotainment package. Now, Audi calls this MMI Navigation Plus with MMI Touch, and it's standard across the range. To operate it all, the improved version of this second-generation Q7 borrows the layout that we first saw in the fourth-generation A8 Saloon, with its 2 centre-stack screens. There's a 10.1-inch one up top and an 8.6-inch monitor just below it. Now, via the MMI setup, the display up top shows you an intelligent 3D navigation system, which is able to take into account traffic congestion and previously driven routes. It can brief you on filling stations and parking places on your route, and it can include 3D graphic models of many European cities. The MMI package also includes voice recognition, which is able to connect with the cloud-based Amazon voice service Alexa. And there's a DVD player, a 10-speaker, 180-watt DAB sound system, and the usual smartphone interface, which hooks you up with the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring connectivity systems, which are included here, but which would cost extra and or be subject to a subscription with most of your rivals. The Audi music interface that offers simple pairing with your mobile devices using 2 USB ports with charge and data functions, plus the Audi phone box package. Well, that can boost your handset signal, and it includes a wireless charging mat to power it up. As an included part of the MMI system, there's a 3-year subscription to the Audi Connect Media Connectivity Package, which works via an embedded SIM card, which is permanently installed in the car and which operates on a data flat rate. So you won't be stung with high roaming charges if you do a little bit of intercontinental motoring. Now, this setup comes with an LTE data transmission module, which establishes high-speed 4G Internet 3 access and creates in your Q7 a Wi-Fi hotspot supporting the superfast LTE advanced mobile data network. It also allows you to navigate with images from Google Earth, to access the Google Points of Interest search function with voice control, and to use a web radio setup with stations from all around the world. Now, through the Connect system, you can also access special in-car versions of both your Facebook and your Twitter pages, and it's also possible to read, write and send text messages and emails. Now, the included online media streaming package, now that will give you access to millions of music tracks, and there's also a clever Audi online traffic information system. Now, that would use live traffic information to reroute you around jams. Also built into Audi Connect is the Car2X services system that the brand has developed in partnership with Daimler and BMW. That allows this Audi to often almost magically respond to future weather or traffic conditions, or to somehow know what's around the next corner. It's not magic, of course. The setup is instead driven by a mobile phone supported so-called vehicle swarm exchange of information system, which will see your Q7 sending data on traffic conditions and driving conditions back to a central hub, which then shares it with other drivers. What else? Well, you can take Audi Connect connectivity with you even when you're not in your Q7, thanks to the improved My Audi app. Now, this transmits points of interest to the navigation system. It can stream music, and it can also transfer your calendar to the MMI infotainment screen. The app also allows you to seamlessly plan a route across multiple devices. So if you're going to a restaurant in an unfamiliar city, for example, and you have to park a few streets away from the venue, then navigation can continue with you on your smartphone as you complete the journey on foot. And finally, as usual with vehicle apps of this sort, you can use it to get a vehicle status report and to lock or unlock the doors from wherever you are. All of that comes as standard with base sport trim, but most customers find the extra for the S-Line trim level we're trying here, primarily because it delivers a significantly more purposeful look. That comes courtesy of larger 20-inch wheels, rear privacy glass and a sport styling pack that includes S-Line themed bumpers, side ventilation grills, side skirts and a roof spoiler. The cabin, meanwhile, is lifted by smarter Valcona leather upholstery, darkened matte brushed aluminium trim, a black cloth headliner, stainless steel pedals, illuminated door sill plates, a stainless steel plate for the lip of the luggage area, and an S-Line branded 3-spoke steering wheel with paddle shifters. If you want to go further, then the black edition spec we mentioned earlier gives you a meaner look, courtesy of titanium black finishing for the front radiator grille, the side door inlays and for the front bumper, plus the side window trimming changes to high gloss black, and there are black roof rails too. Even the larger 21-inch wheels feature a black gloss turned finish. Completely black cabin would be a bit much on this variant. It's actually trimmed in polished oak with a grey finish. In addition, at this level in the range, Audi throws in 4-zone climate control, which gives you separate rear seat air conditioning controls, and there is a flat-bottomed sports steering wheel and the slightly lowered sport version of the adaptive air suspension system. Is it worth finding the extra cash for the top Vorsprung flagship level of trim? Well, we're talking a big £24,000 price jump up from, say, the S-Line spec model we have here. But if you're thinking of heavily embellishing this car anyway, it might be one worth making, because with a Vorsprung variant, you'll find that virtually every significant option box would have been ticked for you. Now, inevitably, the Vorsprung embellishment includes a lot of luxury niceties, larger 22-inch wheels, super sport seats, an Alcantara headliner, a powered steering column, and so on. But there is some extra stuff of real substance too. All-wheel steering, for example. Now, with this setup, the rear wheels are able to turn in the opposite direction to those at the front at parking speeds, and that is to considerably improve manoeuvrability. While at over 37 miles an hour, turning those rear wheels in the same direction as the fronts improves handling and corner turning. And the headlights, they are upgraded at this level with Audi's piercing laser light technology. Another Vorsprung spec feature of note is the upgraded Bang & Olufsen premium 3D sound audio setup, which features 19 speakers, including 3D sound speakers, a 16-channel amplifier and 558 watts of sound. With this top trim level, the front of the cabin will look significantly more premium thanks to the addition of the extended leather pack, and that adds a leather covering for the upper instrument panel, the door rails, the door armrests and the centre console. And the rear seat will be a nicer place to be thanks to side and rear window sun blinds, also heated upholstery and the Audi music interface, which adds a couple of extra USB ports for backseat folk and 2 more USBs for those up the front. Other standard Vorsprung spec feature additions include a vast panoramic glass roof, a head-up display, 360-degree surround view camera system, advanced keyless entry, powered door closure which automatically latches doors left ajar, front seats with massage, cooling and memory functions, double sun visor, side running boards and a multicoloured extended LED interior lighting pack, and that allows you to bathe the cabin in your choice of colour. There's also a certain level of autonomous driving assistance, much of which comes from the adaptive cruise assist system that Vorsprung spec Q7s get as standard. This setup works at any speed between rest and 152 miles an hour, and it can detect lane markings, structures next to the road, vehicles in adjacent lanes and multiple vehicles ahead, and of course it'll adjust your highway speed to suit surrounding traffic. It also works with an included predictive efficiency assist package, which can use navigation data to adjust your Q7's driving demeanour for extra comfort and efficiency, adjusting speed to suit road topography and activating things like highway coasting or engine braking. A whole network of electronic kit is needed to support this kind of capability, up to 5 radar sensors, 5 cameras, 12 ultrasonic sensors and a laser scanner. Much of it also used for the extra high-tech safety features that also come as part of Vorsprung spec, and we'll get to those in a moment. Before we do, let's say a few words about options. Now, rather than paying the huge premium for the top Vorsprung level of trim that we've just been telling you about, most buyers will probably opt for a more affordable model like this one and then add in the optional comfort and sound pack. For around £1,900 extra, that gets you some of the key Vorsprung features, the 3D Bose sound system, the 360-degree camera package, the advanced keyless entry setup, and and the multicoloured LED interior lighting pack. You can make your S-Line or your Black Edition spec Q7 feel even more like a Vorsprung spec model by paying extra for the panoramic glass sunroof that we have here, the Alcantara headliner and the extended leather package. Now, talking of leather, Audi won't charge you any extra if you want to change the upholstery colour of whatever Q7 variant you choose. With the sport model's twin leather upholstery, there are brown, grey and beige options if you really don't want the usual black. With an S-Line or Black Edition models of Alcona leather, your option to full black hide is a leather and Alcantara combination, and that's in either black or grey. The quilted Super Sport seats fitted at the top of the range, they can be had in either black or grey, and on the SQ7 there's the additional option of having them in brighter Arras red. As for other extras you might want, well, on an S-Line model you can add in the flat-bottomed sports steering wheel, avoid base trim, and on a mainstream model you can specify the Audi Virtual Cockpit Plus package, which gives you an extra dynamic display on the instrument binnacle virtual cockpit screen. Now, if you haven't gone for an SQ7 or a plug-in model, you might want to pay the £125 extra that Audi asks for the bigger 85-litre fuel tank. That's 10 litres larger than the standard one. And of course the retractable trailer hitch is optional, and that's operable via a button in the boot. On to aesthetics. Now, unless you want your Q7 painted in solid night black, you'll have to pay your Audi Centra more for your choice of paint colour. Appallingly, even bog standard solid pure white is £750 more. Beyond that, there are the usual metallic shades, and if you've avoided base sport trim, you'll also be offered 3 extra shades: Navara blue, Matador red, or the Pearl Effect Daytona grey finish that we have here. You might want to look at wheels too. Basically, you can pay extra to go a size up with all the mainstream trim levels, so you can have a sport model with 20-inch rims, an S-Line version with 21-inch rims, or a Black Edition with 22-inch rims. For the SQ7, there are a couple of alternative 21 and 22-inch wheel styles, and on that top variant, you can specify red branded brake calipers too. Black Edition and Vorsprung spec Q7s can be embellished with carbon finished exterior mirrors. Enough with optional features, let's move on to look at safety. Now, before we get into all the electronic stuff, we ought to make the point that this car is fundamentally very safe, thanks to its torsionally rigid body shell and its structural front end. In a head-on collision, 3 stress planes in the nose section absorb the forces, plus there are ISOFIX charge seat mountings, a tyre pressure warning light, and all the usual front, side and curtain airbags too. Should the worst happen and you have a crash that activates the airbags, then a standard Audi Connect safety and service feature that will automatically alert the emergency services with your exact GPS location. But of course, the primary purpose of modern safety technology is to avoid an accident in the first place, and that is the task of a whole armoury of electronic camera-driven features. Now, over 40 of these have been developed for this Q7, and many of them are standard. As you'd expect in this day and age, there is an autonomous braking system that's included in that roster. Ingolstadt calls their setup Audi Presense Front, and like other similar packages, this one will scan the road ahead looking for potential accident hazards as you drive, and it will automatically brake the car to try to avoid them if you don't respond to the warnings. There is also a lane departure warning set up. Now that works between 37 and 152 miles an hour, and it issues a warning if you drift out of your lane on the highway before applying subtle steering assistance to ease you back to where you should be. In addition, your Q7 will come with distance warning. Now that will alert you if you're getting too close to the vehicle in front of you, and rest recommendation. Now that will alert you if drowsiness is detected in your driving reactions. For more of Audi's sophisticated camera safety and semi-autonomous driving tech features, you'll have to either upgrade to top Vorsprung spec, which has all of that as standard, or on the other variants, you'll pay extra for the optional City Assist pack and Tour pack options that your Audi Centre will offer you. So let's start with the City Assist pack. Now that includes 6 main features. Side Assist works as a blind spot monitor and warns you on the move if you're dangerously about to pull out to overtake in the path of another vehicle. Cross Traffic Assist Front warns of dangerous cross-traffic movements at junctions, and it can, if necessary, automatically apply the brakes, preventing an accident. Cross Traffic Assist Rear, well, that will warn you of oncoming traffic when you're reversing out of a space. Pre-Sense Rear, that warns you via a flashing light if you're just about to be hit from behind, so you can try to take avoiding action. And Exit Warning stops a passenger door opening when the car is stationary and oncoming traffic is dangerously approaching. Finally, in a situation where you're driving but you've lost control and an accident impact is inevitable, there is a Pre-Sense Basic system which will activate milliseconds just before the crash, tightening the seat belts and, if necessary, closing the windows and the sunroof to give you a better chance of surviving it. Pre-Sense Basic also features one of the 7 features bundled into the other key optional safety pack that a buyer could specify on any of the Q7 variants below Vorsprung spec. It's called the Tour Pack, and we've been trying it on this particular car here. And now, as well as extra safety peace of mind, you additionally get a degree of driving autonomy tech included. Now, we mentioned 2 of the key elements of this earlier when we were talking you through the Vorsprung model specification. Namely Adaptive Cruise Assist, which can control much of your Q7's driving functionality at cruising speeds, and Audi's Predictive Efficiency Assistant, which uses navigation data to automatically optimise comfort and efficiency. The other Tour Pack inclusions include Turn Assist, which activates when you put on the indicators and will brake the car if you try to manoeuvre or pull out in front of another vehicle. In addition, you get a Collision Avoidance Assistant. Now that will support your actions during an accident avoidance manoeuvre. It'll provide extra steering torque and will also use the vehicle's sensors to calculate the optimum path of avoidance. Now we should further mention that the Tour Pack also includes traffic sign recognition, and that will picture speed signs as you pass them and then display them for you on the virtual cockpit instrument binnacle screen. And finally, as part of that pack, there is also an emergency assist element that is added to the standard lane departure warning system. Now that is able to autonomously bring the car to a safe, controlled stop if you don't respond to repeated warnings about drifting out of lane, as might be the case if, for example, you were suddenly taken ill at the wheel. Ultimately, however you specify your Q7, there are going to be a lot of safety systems to oversee, particularly if you've ticked a few options boxes. Now, the car itself oversees all these features via an incorporated central driver assistance controller, which permanently calculates an image of the driving environment that you're in, appropriately activating the different elements to meet different situations. But how do you monitor all of this as a driver? Well, Audi has tried to simplify that process here by providing a driver assist button at the bottom of the centre stack, there to allow the selection of the kind of electronic security blanket that you want. Basic includes only the most important items, Maximum will give you everything, and Individual allows you to pick and choose the features that you want activated. At the lowest driver assist level, Basic, there is that standard Pre-Sense front autonomous braking system that we mentioned earlier, and the lane departure warning system that's here embellished with the emergency assist feature because we've got that optional Tour Pack fitted. The top maximum driver assist setting adds in things like the distance warning and the rest recommendation features that we mentioned earlier on. It's all very reassuring. all the hybrid headlines surrounding this revised post-2019 era Q7 model might lead you to expect greater efficiency gains than are actually delivered. Audi's claim for the difference its MHEV or mild hybrid system makes is actually quite modest, a saving of 0.7 litres of fuel every 100 kilometres or 62 miles. It's worthwhile, certainly, but you can keep the Prius comparisons on hold. A bigger efficiency change actually took place when this second generation design first saw the light of day back in 2015, thanks to a combination of a new generation MLB Evo chassis and the use of Audi space frame construction, which allowed 41% of the body structure to be fashioned from aluminium. This Type 4 M Series model managed to weigh in up to 240 kilos lighter than its Mark 1 predecessor, or 325 kilos in 5-seat form, and that's a saving equivalent to the weight of a grand piano. Mind you, all that did was to return this Audi to somewhere near the class standard. Even now, it's still 20 kilos heavier than an equivalent BMW X5. You could say the same about the MHEV engine tweaks. Now, just in case you haven't seen our driving experience section, we'll brief you on what Audi's definition of mild hybrid tech actually means. It's a BAS belt alternator starter generator powering a 48-volt main electrical setup in which a compact lithium-ion battery in the boot stores energy harvested via a KERS or kinetic energy recovery system. During braking, the BAS package can cover up to 8 kilowatts of power and feed it back into the battery. If the driver takes their foot off the accelerator at speeds between 34 and 99 miles an hour, the mild hybrid system will recuperate energy while the car rolls in idle or coasts for up to 40 seconds with its engine automatically switched off. The belt alternator starter generator restarts the engine the next time the accelerator is depressed, and it does so faster and more gently than a conventional starter. All of this you will particularly notice at urban speeds when the engine start-stop system is cutting in and out. The start-stop range begins at just under 14 miles an hour, so you'll often find this car coasting up to the end of a traffic queue or a traffic light or a level crossing. All of which sounds good, but in fuel consumption terms, it still leaves the volume diesel versions of this car adrift of BMW and Mercedes rivals, which don't yet feature mild hybrid tech, so something's not quite right somewhere. To be specific, a Q750 TDI S-Line variant, like the one we're trying here, manages up to 33.2 mpg on the WLTP combined cycle and 180 grams per kilometre of NEDC-rated CO2. To give you some class perspective, a directly comparable but more conventionally engined BMW xDrive 30D M Sport manages up to 37.7 mpg and 165 grams per kilometre. But if you want a more specific comparison, take a look at how effective a mild hybrid setup can be by checking out the fuel and CO2 figures of the Volvo XC90 B5 diesel, which at the time of this test was the only other model in the segment featuring such an electrified setup. That Swedish contender manages up to 44.1 mpg and 154 grams per kilometre of CO2. Now, in case you're wondering, the efficiency stats of the base 45 TDI version of this Q7 won't take you any closer to that impressive class standard. The fuel consumption reading for this entry-level model is the same as that for the 50 TDI we're trying here, and for some reason the CO2 stat is actually a bit worse. The best figure that base variant can offer is 184 grams per kilometre. Of course, you could do better if you stumped up a bit more and got one of the 55 TFSI-E or 60 TFSI-E plug-in petrol versions, but there, of course, it's a question of keeping the car charged up, which should take around 2.5 hours from a 7 kilowatt garage wall box, and making the absolute most of the potential all-electric driving range, which is rated at about 26 miles. If you don't do that, you'll essentially end up with a heavier version of the conventional 55 TFSI petrol variant, and take it from us, one of those is not going to be cheap to run. So we can understand why 90% of Q7 buyers opt for one of the 3-litre TDI variants. Using one of those during the period of this test, we've been achieving just under 30 miles per gallon in regular use. That would equate to a driving range from the 75-litre fuel tank of around 475 miles in normal motoring, or more if you pay extra for the optional 85-litre tank. That is standard, incidentally, on the petrol and the SQ7 models. Mention of the SQ7 TDI RTI reminds us that we need to give you the figures for that. On 21-inch wheels, you're looking at up to 30.1 mpg and 198 grams per kilometre of CO2, which, to give you some perspective, is way better than the Range Rover Sport SDV8, but it's significantly behind a BMW X5 M50D. Whatever your Q7 variant of choice, magazine tests have pointed out that across the board, the efficiency figures we've quoted can be difficult to achieve in day-to-day motoring. But then that is not an issue that's exclusive to Audi. Much will depend on the driver. Hence the Ingolstadt brand's efforts with this car to help the person at the wheel to do more when it comes to frugality. An efficiency assist segment of the centre dash infotainment screen allows you to activate or to deactivate some of the car's main frugality aids. I'm talking about things like the intelligent coasting feature that we mentioned earlier and accelerator pedal feedback, which will resist you pressing too hard on the throttle. You can also activate general economy tips and what Audi calls predictive messaging. There is also an energy consumers readout in the instrument cluster, and that shows you the effect that, say, the air conditioning is having on the car's energy usage. Beyond that, as usual with the company's models, there is an efficiency setting on the Drive Select vehicle dynamic system, and that will tweak the air conditioning, gear shift timings, and the throttle response for maximum frugality. Now, if you choose to use the individual Drive Select mode, which allows you to tailor your preferred settings, then you'll find that efficient is one of the 3 options that you can choose for each criteria setting. The MMI navigation system on this car has been programmed around what Audi calls predictive and efficient driving, which means that it will adapt the drive demeanour of your Q7 based on things like speed limits and gradient changes. And if you specify the optional Tour Pack on this car, you'll find that it can be even more proactively efficient, and that's thanks to the Predictive Efficiency Assist setup, which comes as part of that pack's Adaptive Cruise Assist system. Predictive Efficiency Assist really is very clever, constantly gathering navigation data, camera images and feedback from the built-in Car2X message system, which receives car swarm feedback from other similarly equipped vehicles. Using all this, the software can then contribute to a more economical driving style, for example, instructing you when to release the accelerator before entering a curve or behind a slower vehicle, for instance. Get onto the highway, and with the Adaptive Cruise Control system activated, Efficiency Assist will automatically make all the frugal driving adjustments for you. What else? Well, do bear in mind that, as with all modern diesel cars, the TDI versions of this one use an AdBlue fuel additive, and that's stored in a separate rear tank that'll need to be topped up as part of regular servicing. Talking of maintenance, servicing your Q7 should be no more taxing than is the case with one of the company's smaller cars. As usual with Audi models, there is a choice of either a fixed or a flexible servicing regime, the choice between the two depending on the extent of your likely annual mileage. The fixed schedule is aimed at drivers covering fewer than 10,000 miles a year, and it includes an oil change service every 9,000 miles or every year, plus an inspection service every 19,000 miles or every 2 years. If you cover more than 10,000 miles a year, the flexible service schedule will be more appropriate. This regime includes oil change and inspection services at variable intervals of up to every 19,000 miles or every 2 years. Now, whichever package you go for, you'll need to change the brake fluid after the first 3 years and then every 2 years thereafter. Overall maintenance costs can be kept down if you go for one of the prepaid servicing plans, which you'll be offered at initial purchase, and they can cover you for a maximum of 3 years and also include an oil service and a major service. You may be interested to know that this car can even book its own service appointments via an Audi Connect safety and service system app. As well as providing emergency calling and online roadside assistance, this feature can, at the appropriate time, send a service request direct to your local dealer. Alternatively, you can sign up for Audi Service Request, which uses the onboard Wi-Fi to enable your car to communicate with the dealer. As your Q7 nears a time when work's going to be needed, the diagnosis diagnostics alert your nominated local Audi centre, who will then contact you to book a convenient time. Another neat service that your dealer can offer you is the so-called Audi Cam system. Now here, technicians carrying out workshop inspections on your Q7 can focus a handheld Audi Cam camera on specific problems and accompany the image with a verbal diagnosis to create footage that can then be sent to your computer or to your smartphone. That way you will know exactly what work you're authorising on the car. What else? Well, let's talk tax. The CO2 figures we briefed you on earlier for the two 3-litre TDI diesel models see them slotting into the highest possible 37% benefit-in-kind company car tax bracket, but then that is also the case for the rival BMW X5 and Mercedes GLE. As for vehicle excise duty, well, those CO2 readings will mean an initial payment of £830 when the car's first registered, which is usually rolled into the on-the-road price. After that, you'll pay the standard £140 a year, plus an extra £310 per year for the first 5 years of ownership. That's a surcharge applied to all vehicles with a list price of £40,000 or more. That will bring your annual VAT tax bill in years 2 to 6 of ownership to £450 a year. On to residuals. Now, for once, we're testing an Audi that isn't top of its class in this regard, but it's not far off. According to industry experts CAP, a Q7 50 TDI S-Line, like the one we're trying here, would, after 3 years and 60,000 miles, be worth 46% of its original value. The class leader in this respect is the Range Rover Sport SDV6 HSE, which manages 53%. This is where a Q7 would make up cost-saving ground on that Volvo XC90 B5 diesel rival we mentioned earlier, because that Swedish competitor's residuals are way off those of this Audi. They're rated at 41% over the same period. An SQ7 TDI, by the way, is way out in front in its segment in residual value terms. It manages a 53% residual after 3 years and 60,000 miles. That's compared to just 42% for a BMW X5 M50D and 43% for a Range Rover Sport SDV8. When it comes to pence per mile running costs, mainstream versions of this Q7 also put up a good showing. CAP reckoned that a 50 TDI S-Line variant like this one will cost you 69.07 pence per month to run over 3 years and 60,000 miles. The class leader, BMW's X5 xDrive 30D M Sport, is only fractionally ahead at 68.74 ppm. An equivalent Range Rover Sport SDV6 HSE is way off on 75.99 ppm. As for that SQ7 TDI, well, that variant's strong residuals help here. CAP reckons that an SQ7 will cost 74.59 pence per month to run over the 3-year 60,000 mile period, and that compares to 85.44 pence per month for the BMW X5 M50D and a whopping 104.93 pence per month for the Range Rover Sport SDV8. And we'll finish by covering the warranty. All cars in this class get 3 years of cover, but whereas BMW and Mercedes don't limit your mileage on that period, Audi rather meanly restricts you to 60,000 miles. Optional extra cost packages can extend that cover to either 4 or 5 years and 75 or 95,000 miles respectively. As for insurance groupings, well, for the base 45 TDI version, it's Group 42E for Sport or S-Line trim, Group 43E for a Black Edition model, and Group 47E for a top Vorsprung version. If you're considering either this 50 TDI variant or the 50 TFSI petrol derivative, then you're looking at Group 44E, unless you're looking at Vorsprung trim, in which case it's Group 49E. The SQ7 TDI is inevitably a top-of-the-shop Group 50E. Here's a big Audi SUV that, in an eco-conscious world, you could now own proudly rather than slightly awkwardly. A statement of technology and innovation with electronic intuition anticipating needs you didn't know you had, as well as simply a very plush and practical way to transport your household just about anywhere, riding beautifully on its sophisticated air suspension. More than ever, this Q7 looks the part. The badge works for the boardroom. It's as capable off-road as most will ever need, and the 7-seat format is fine for families. Ingolstadt now provides the most complete plug-in offering in the segment too, and the sector's very fastest diesel option. Now true, there are rival large SUVs that are better to drive in this segment, but none of them are as practical, and yes, there are certainly others that are significantly cheaper, but none of them are as advanced. Are there issues? Yeah, a few. We are a little disappointed that the much trumpeted mild hybrid tech hasn't delivered more in terms of efficiency gains, especially given that this model's Volvo XC90 rival has already shown just what can be achieved in that regard. And there are elements of the signature twin touchscreen cabin that, in our view, slightly prioritise style over function. It all looks pretty smart though, and very high-end. In summary, a significant package of updates has enabled this Q7 to continue to compete on equal terms with much newer designs in this segment, and that is no mean achievement. Potential buyers will be attracted not only by this SUV's cool, classy feel, but also by strong residuals which deliver overall running costs which remain very competitive. Other competitors might be glitzier, but this Ingolstadt contender remains an all-round proposition that's very difficult to beat and very Vorsprung durch Technik.